वैष्णव जन तो तेने कहिए जे पीड़ पराई जाने रे पर दुखे उपकार करे तो मन अभिमान नो याने रे वैष्णव जन तो सकल लोक मा सौने वंदे वाच काज मना निजल राखे धन धन जननी तेनी रे वैष्णव जन दो समदृष्टि ने कृष्ण त्यागी परस्त्री जैन मातरे की सचन बोले पर धन न जाले हाथ रे वैष्णव जन दो मोह माया व्यापे नहीं देने मन मारे राम नाम सुरे ताली लागी सकल तीरथ तेना तन मारे वैष्णव जन दो वन लोभी ने कपट रहित भे काम चौधरी वाया रे पणे नरसैयो तेनु दर्शन करता पूरा ये को तेर तार्या रे वैष्णव जन दो उत्तरं यत् समुद्रस्य हिमाद्रे चैव दक्षिणं वर्षं तद्भारतं नाम द्वारति यत्र सन्ततिः.
The country that lies north of the ocean and south of the snowy mountains is called Bharatvarsha. In this ancient land, from time immemorial, the eternal snows of the Himalayas, wrapped in deep meditation, have formed a part of the life of the people, bound by a sacred thread of common heritage. The plains are watered by 1,000 streams that mingle in the music of great rivers, linked up with India's civilization and culture, carrying fertility and wealth, spreading life and strength. Traversed by green and fertile hills, blossoming trees bright with orchard gleams, and fields of waving corn, touched by the golden rays in the east, India is bounded on three sides by the palm-clad seashores, chanting to the tune of the ocean waves. On the west coast, the Sea of Oman splashes against the solid rocks of the city of Porbandar in Saurashtra. The houses are chiefly built of white and soft stone. The distant Barda hills keep guard over the white city, otherwise known as Sudamapuri. Porbandar has been mainly a commercial town. An enterprising and sturdy people have traded from remote antiquity with lands beyond the seas, Arabia and Africa. The town was the ancestral home of the Gandhis, who belonged to the Vaishnav cult. It was here that Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi was born on the morning of October 2nd, 1869. This house is associated with an incident which instilled the spirit of Satyagraha in Mohan's blood. The Gandhi family played an important part in the political life of the state. Uttam Chand Gandhi, Mohan's grandfather, was the Diwan of Porbandar. Being a staunch believer in the purity of justice, once he had a tussle with the regent for sheltering an innocent grocer. The soldiers of the state shelled his house. With a firm determination to sacrifice himself and the members of his family at the altar of justice, he remained undaunted, praying to God. Karamchand Gandhi, Mohan's father, succeeded Uttam Chand as Diwan. Karamchand, like his father, was a man of principle and loved virtue more than wealth. Mohan's mother, Putlibai, was deeply religious and had a strong personality. She would take the hardest vows without flinching. Her influence, more than any other, molded the character of Mohan. At the age of 6, Mohan was sent to school close to his house. As a student, he was mediocre but punctual. While he was very gentle and playful, he was obstinate. In this small room, his books and his lessons were his sole companions. In the Gandhi family, the Tulsi Ramayana was recited regularly. Mohan was taught by Rambha, his nurse, to repeat the name of Ram as a remedy for his fear of ghosts. That laid the foundation of his deep devotion to Ram. Mohan was only 7 when his father left the service of the Porbandar state and moved with his family to Rajkot. Karamchand Gandhi was soon appointed the Diwan of the state. Mohan and his brother Karsandas were admitted to the primary school. Once an itinerant showman came to their place. One of of the pictures he showed was of Shravana, carrying his blind parents on a pilgrimage. The picture left on Mohan's mind an indelible impression of a son's devotion to his parents. Just about this time, he happened to see the play Harish Chandra, which inspired him to follow truth and go through all ordeals for its sake. Rajkot was one of the few towns in Saurashtra to have a high school. Young Mohan entered the Kathiawar High School when he was 12. Mohan was forbidden to touch a scavenger who used to come to their house. Though young and dutiful, he argued with his mother that untouchability was not sanctioned by religion, and that touching a scavenger could not be sinful. At the early age of 13, Mohan was married to Kasturbai, of the same age at Porbandar. Soon he assumed the authority of a husband. In 1887, Mohandas Gandhi passed the matriculation examination from the Ahmedabad Center and joined the Samaldas College at Bhavnagar. But at the end of the first term, he left the college to proceed to England to study law. Lakshmidas, his brother, arranged for funds to send him abroad. Mother consented only after Mohandas took an oath not to touch wine, women, and meat. This oath saved him from many pitfalls in London. At the age of 18, he sailed from Bombay on September 4, 1888, despite stiff resistance from caste elders to his going overseas. On his arrival in London, Mohandas found everything strange around him. He almost starved himself as he found the vegetarian food tasteless, yet he remained true to his vow. He went in for well-tailored suits and took lessons in dancing and music to become an English gentleman. Mohandas Gandhi joined the Inner Temple to qualify as a barrister on November 6, 1888. Informing his brother about his admission, he wrote that it filled his heart with joy and that he did not need meat or liquor in spite of bitter cold. The aspirant, after being an English gentleman, chose to convert himself into a serious student and framed his own timetable to the minute. He invested much money in textbooks, studied them with unflagging interest, and he read Roman law in Latin. To simplify his living, he rented a room and cooked his own food. The change harmonized his inner and outer urges. He joined the London Vegetarian Society, came in contact with many interesting persons, began his own experiments in dietetics, and contributed articles on Hindu customs and diet to the Society's magazine. Alcohol he described as an enemy of mankind and a curse of civilization. Towards the end of 1889, Mohandas read the Bhagavad Gita for the first time in Arnold's translation, the song Celestial, along with the original. The verse in the second chapter, teaching that renunciation is the highest form of religion, impressed him deeply. The Gita gave him the light he needed and opened to him a new way of life. At the instance of a friend, Mohandas read the Bible. He liked the New Testament, and the Sermon on the Mount went straight to his heart. This reading whetted his appetite for studying the lives of great religious teachers, and he acquainted himself with the principal religions of the world. He first met Dadabhai Naoroji, the grand old man of India, during this period. He became a source of inspiration to young Mohandas. M.K. Gandhi passed his examination with credit and was called to the bar on June 10, 1891. His 3 years' stay in England was eventful, as those were the years of great intellectual activity and freedom of thought and speech. The sea was stormy on July 5th when barrister Mohandas Gandhi landed at Bombay. The joy of homecoming was turned into boundless grief for him. She, whom he was so eager to meet, his beloved mother, had passed away. In Bombay, Gandhi came in contact with Raj Chandra, a merchant and a poet absorbed in godly pursuits. He captivated Gandhi and became his guide and spiritual refuge. To establish legal practice, gain experience of courts, and study Indian law, Barrister Gandhi applied for admission as an advocate to the Bombay High Court. Not finding enough work, disappointed, he soon left for Rajkot. In April 1893, Gandhi set forth for South Africa to appear in a lawsuit on behalf of an Indian firm on a year's contract. After a month's journey, he landed at Durban. The racial discrimination in the society startled him and cut him to the quick. When the coolie barrister, as he was called, appeared in the Durban court, he was ordered to remove his turban. Gandhi felt insulted, demurred, and left. The press described him as an unwelcome visitor. As a victim of the color bar, he received thrashings and suffered grave insults, but yet he refused to sue the white assailants for personal grievances. During his stay in South Africa, the spiritual urge within him became a living force. He studied different faiths and practiced self-restraint. Tolstoy's "The Kingdom of God is Within You" overwhelmed him. After a year's stay, while about to leave for India, at a farewell party, he learned that the South African government was to introduce a bill to disfranchise Indians. He said, "The bill is the first nail into our coffin." He took up the cause of his disinherited countrymen. Thus began the long battle against race prejudice. Gandhi subordinated his legal career to public work and drew up a petition, the first ever sent by Indians to a South African legislature, demanding the retention of the right to franchise. The agitation infused a new life into the community. South Africa became the land of his adoption. Along with his colleagues, Gandhi founded the Natal Indian Congress to remove the hardships of the Indians and to promote harmony between them and the Europeans. Then followed years of hard work and organizing, with all the force and energy at his command. He appealed to the higher sense of his adversaries and brought home to them that their treatment of the Indians was not in conformity with justice and morality. Gandhi's public activities went hand in hand with his spiritual progress. He read widely, about 80 books, which made him realize the infinite possibilities of universal love. He read the sayings of Zarathustra. The beauty of Hindu scriptures began to grow upon him. Irving's Life of Muhammad increased his admiration for the Prophet. The Indians commissioned Gandhi to lay their grievances before public men and public bodies in India. On June 5, 1896, he sailed home, carrying great responsibilities at the young age of 26. Gandhi visited the principal centers of political life in India. His impassioned speeches stirred the Indian mind. The green pamphlet depicting the conditions of the Indians in South Africa aroused the people's consciousness. He met great Indian leaders. Justice Ranade listened to him with attention. The man who could effectively guide him was Sir Ferozshah Mehta, who met him as a loving father. Sir Ferozshah seemed to him like the Himalayas. He met Lokmanya Tilak, who promised him every help. The Lokmanya, he thought, was like the ocean. Gopal Krishna Gokhale invited him to his bosom like the river Ganga. In response to an urgent cable from Natal, Gandhi left India with Kasturbai on November 28, 1896. On reaching the port of Durban, the ship was put in quarantine because of the white residents' agitation for the repatriation of the Indians. After 23 days of quarantine, when Gandhi landed, some European youngsters pelted him with stones, snatched away his turban, and kicked him. Even then, his heart did not arraign his assailants. Though he declined to prosecute them, the incident fanned the flame of prejudice against the Indians. Bills imposing stringent restrictions on Indian trade and immigration were introduced by the South African government. Gandhi sought help from leading men in India and England to create public opinion against the disabilities of the Indians in Natal. In this little house in Durban, a period of introspection dawned in Gandhi's life. He developed a passion for self-help and simplicity. He studied the book, Advice to a Mother, equipped himself with the knowledge necessary for the physical, mental, and spiritual well-being of his children, and infused a spirit of service and self-respect in them. He longed for humanitarian service and worked in a hospital. When a leper came to his door, Gandhi offered him shelter, dressed his wounds, and looked after him. On the outbreak of the Boer War between the Dutch settlers and the British in 1899, Gandhi's loyalty to the empire drove him to side with the British, though his sympathies were with the Boers. he organized an Indian ambulance corps and left for the front. They worked under the fire of enemy guns and carried wounded soldiers to hospitals through heat and dust. The humble work of the sons of the empire was applauded, and they were awarded the War Medal. On the eve of Gandhi's departure for India, after 6 years' stay in South Africa, the Indians bathed him with the nectar of love and presented him with an address and costly gifts. The gifts agitated him deeply. Having accepted a life of service and conquered infatuation for jewelry, Gandhi created a trust of the gifts in favor of the community. On his return to India in 1901, Gandhi reached Calcutta to pay his first visit to the Indian National Congress, moved a resolution on the conditions of the Indians in South Africa, and pleaded for India's active sympathy. There was no limit to insanitation in the Congress camp. He gave the volunteers object lessons in sweeping and scavenging. Before settling down, Gandhi made an extensive tour of India. To acquaint himself with the hardships of the passengers, he traveled third class. Gandhi informed Gokhale that he had opened an office in Bombay. Just when he seemed to be settling down, he received an unexpected cable from South Africa and returned to Natal at the call of his countrymen. Realizing that he must remain in Transvaal and fight the battle through, he set up his office in Johannesburg. He was enrolled as an attorney of the Supreme Court. The spirit of sacrifice gradually grew stronger and changed his mode of life. The Gita became an infallible guide of conduct. Aparigraha, non-possession, and samabhava, equability, presupposed a change of heart, a change of attitude for Gandhi. In a letter to his brother, he explained how his life was becoming truth intoxicated and declared his intention to renounce his worldly possessions and to utilize his savings for the community. Seeking to purify his physical self, he read treatises on nature cure. His dislike for medicine steadily increased, and he fasted and experimented in dietetics. He had great faith in earth treatment and applied the mud poultice to ailing patients. He wrote Guide to Health to help the people to keep the temple of the spirit, the human body, in a fit condition. He believed that perfect health can be attained by living in obedience to the laws of God. Gandhi felt the need of a journal specially devoted to the cause of the Indians. In June 1903, the weekly Indian Opinion was launched in 4 languages. Week after week, Gandhi poured out his soul in its columns. For him, the single aim of journalism was service of truth. During a journey, he became absorbed in the perusal of Ruskin's Unto This Last. which teaches that men can be happy only if they obey the moral law. He discovered some of his deepest convictions reflected in the book, which brought about an instantaneous and practical transformation in his life. Later, he paraphrased the book, entitling it Sarvodaya, the welfare of all, and maintained that if every Indian stuck to truth, Swaraj will come of its own accord. Convinced that the life of labor is a life worth living, Gandhi bought a fruit orchard at Phoenix. He formed a nucleus of a settlement which led a Spartan life. The colony was self-supporting, and the material requirements of life were reduced to a minimum. Indian opinion was printed at the farm. Settlers learned all aspects of press work. Hand power was preferred to mechanical power. This paved the way for the highest moral uplift of the settlers. Gandhi kept a close track of events in India. He advocated the abolition of the salt tax, called for united opposition to Bengal's partition, supported the boycott of British goods and hailed the Swadeshi movement. He emphasized the need for communal harmony, commended the adoption of Vande Mataram as India's national anthem, and of Hindustani as a common language for achieving nationhood. He supported the demand for home rule in the name of justice and humanity. During the Zulu rebellion in 1906, Gandhi was appointed Sergeant Major in the Indian Stretcher Bearer Corps. He and his men did hard, self-sacrificing work, carrying the injured up and down the hills and nursing the wounded Zulu rebels. This mission of mercy eased Gandhi's conscience. Long treks to the hamlets of the suffering tribesmen afforded ample opportunity to Gandhi for self-analysis. He clearly saw that an aspirant after a life devoted to service must accept poverty as a constant companion and observe celibacy, for one cannot follow both the flesh and the spirit. He sealed his brahmacharya with a vow for life. On return from the war, Gandhi was dismayed to find that the Transvaal government had introduced an ordinance compelling all Asians to take out a certificate of registration. Condemning this black act, Gandhi observed that it was not merely abominable, but a crime against humanity. The Indian community was fiercely indignant. On September 11, 1906, Gandhi took the pledge at a mass meeting with God as witness. I shall die, but not submit to the anti-Asiatic law. Since that day, Gandhi's life story has mainly been the history of Satyagraha. Emphasizing the moral basis of the impending struggle, Gandhi gave a signal for the passive resistance movement. Attorney Gandhi, Honorary Secretary of the British Indian Association of Transvaal, stood in the dock, considering the role of a political prisoner far more honorable than that of a lawyer. On January 10, 1908, Gandhi entered the prison gate for the first time for civil disobedience. He donned a convict's clothes and ate jail rations, believing that whoever has a taste for reading good books is able to bear loneliness in any place with great ease. He spent his time in reading. On reading Socrates, he felt that Indians should learn to live and die like Socrates, the great Satyagrahi. After about a fortnight, the prison gates were opened for Gandhi and his colleagues, consequent upon the Smuts-Gandhi settlement, which proposed the acceptance of voluntary registration by the Indians and the repeal of the Black Act by the government. The commencement of voluntary registration was signalized by a murderous attack upon Gandhi by a misguided countryman. To die by the hand of a brother was not a matter of sorrow for Gandhi, since death, he thought, was the appointed end of all life. True to his pledge to take out the first certificate, Gandhi gave his fingerprints from the sick bed. General Smuts played foul and did not repeal the Black Act. The Indian community was thrown into a turmoil. The struggle was resumed with a bonfire of certificates, and the resolve to court wholesale imprisonment was a challenge to the government. The fearless fighters had full faith in the righteousness of their cause and in God. The movement was in full swing. Gandhi was sentenced to 2 months' hard labor. Suffering is our remedy. Victory is certain, was his message for the people. In prison, he volunteered to do scavenging. On hearing the news of his wife's illness, Gandhi wrote to her, "I am very much grieved, but I am not in a position to nurse you. I have offered my all to the Satyagraha struggle. If death comes to you, you should depart with faith in God, as in Satyagraha. Life or death does not make any difference." The struggle continued with unabated vigor. The passive resistors showed magnificent courage by seeking imprisonment again and again. On February 25, 1909, Gandhi was re-imprisoned. He read a great deal in prison. Like Thoreau, Gandhi did not feel for a moment confined, and the prison walls seemed a great waste of stone and mortar. He was convinced that a government which is evil has no room for good men and women except in its prisons, for the real road to ultimate happiness and freedom lay in resisting unjust laws and undergoing suffering in the interest of one's country. In a letter from prison to his son, Gandhi emphasized the importance of chastity, poverty, and hard work. For education to him did not mean knowledge of letters, but character building and knowledge of duty. While on deputation in England, Gandhi acquainted Count Leo Tolstoy, who had long been interested in India, with the civil disobedience movement in Transvaal, which, if successful, was likely to serve as an example to the downtrodden millions in India and the world. He also sent him a copy of the first biography of him written by Reverend Doak. In his reply to Gandhi, Tolstoy expressed the liveliest sympathy for the fight between gentleness and brutality, between humility and love on one side and conceit and violence on the other. On his return voyage on board the Kildonian castle, Gandhi worked day and night on his 30,000-word book, Hind Swaraj, Indian Home Rule, containing the quintessence of his ideas. When the right hand was exhausted, he wrote with his left hand. Condemning modern civilization, which is purely material, he wrote that East and West can really meet when the West has thrown overboard modern civilization almost in its entirety. He observed that there is just the same inviolable connection between the means and the ends as there is between the seed and the tree. Advocating the use of truth force against brute force for the attainment of Swaraj, which meant self-rule or self-control, he declared that his life henceforth would be dedicated to its attainment. Sending the booklet to Tolstoy, Gandhi asked for his criticism. Tolstoy thought the question treated in the book was of the greatest importance for the whole of humanity. Reverend Doak's biography of Gandhi gave Tolstoy an opportunity to understand him better. 2 months before his death, the Russian sage wrote to Gandhi that non-resistance is nothing else but the discipline of love undeformed by false interpretations. Passive resistance in Transvaal seemed to him the most fundamental work in which not only the Christians but all the peoples of the world must participate. Gandhi's dream of developing a community of satyagrahis, living a new and simple life in rural surroundings, took final shape on a farm near Johannesburg named after Tolstoy. Gandhi espoused poverty, made further changes in his mode of living, and maintained a regular diary of his daily activities and expenses. Every little experiment, from dietetics to the discipline of the inmates, to meet their economic, educational, moral, and spiritual problems, was conducted on the farm. The inmates imbibed the lesson of mutual service, courtesy, and industry. The weak became strong, and labor proved to be a tonic for all. Gandhi's faith and courage were at their highest in Tolstoy Farm, which proved to be a center of spiritual purification and penance for the final campaign. Gopal Krishna Gokhale came to South Africa in October 1912 in response to Gandhi's request. He received a tumultuous welcome. From the moment of his landing, Gandhi acted as his secretary and personal attendant. Gokhale came to assess the condition of the Indians and assist Gandhi in ameliorating it. His message to the Indians was, if you have to resume your struggle, the civilized world will wish you success. But the issue will largely turn on your readiness to suffer and sacrifice in a just cause. Gandhi seemed to Gokhale to have in him the marvelous spiritual power to turn ordinary men around him into heroes and martyrs. On the passing of the immigration bill, a fresh grievance arose, and Gandhi said, "Once more into the breach, my friends." In October 1913, hundreds of Indians, men and women with children in their arms, thronged Newcastle to march to Transvaal as a protest against the £3 tax levied on their freedom. They possessed no worldly goods. They had only the sky as their roof. But they had great faith in their leader, who shared their daily hardships, nursed the sick, and fed the hungry. The soldiers of Satyagraha offered prayers and began the epic march in the name of God. Gandhi was arrested 3 times in 4 days, but the march continued, proclaiming the grim tenacity and the stern determination of the marchers. Gandhi appealed to the government in the name of humanity not to tear him away from the marchers and leave them leaderless, as it was a violation of all considerations of justice. Gandhi was sentenced to 12 months' rigorous imprisonment on 4 counts. After an incarceration of hardly 6 weeks, he was released unconditionally. Consequent upon a truce with government, the Indian Relief Bill, vindicating the principles of civil resistance and racial equality, was passed. As a penance for the loss of lives in the struggle, imposing a vow of self-suffering on himself, Gandhi adopted an ascetic mode of life. On the triumphant end of the Satyagraha struggle, Gandhi observed, "Satyagraha is a priceless weapon, and those who wield it are strangers to disappointment or defeat." Gandhi felt that his mission in South Africa was over. He had spent 21 years there, sharing to the full the joys and sorrows of human experience, and had realized his vocation in life. He sailed for England on July 18, 1914, along with Kasturbai, on his way back to India. War was declared on August 4th. Gandhi reached London on August 6th. Instead of turning England's need into an opportunity for pressing Indian demands, Gandhi offered his services to the empire and once again organized an ambulance corps. Owing to a deterioration in his health, Gandhi sailed for India on December 19th, with the hope that the connection between India and England might be a source of spiritual comfort to the whole world. Gandhi and Kasturbai were given an imposing reception at the quay when they landed at Bombay on January 9, 1915. Gandhi bound himself by a promise to Gokhale not to express any opinion on public questions until he had gained sufficient experience in India, and proceeded to Kathiawar to meet relatives and friends. He received a warm welcome. People spontaneously addressed him as Mahatma, the great soul. Soon after, Gandhi's Phoenix disciples took shelter at Shanti Niketan Ashram,
poet Tagore wrote to Gandhi that they would form a living link in the sadhana of both of their lives. On their arrival at Shantiniketan to meet the Phoenix family, Gandhi and Kasturbai were honored in the traditional manner. Delighted with the artistic atmosphere of the ashram, Gandhi hoped that through her Oriental culture, India would establish friendly relations with the Eastern and the Western worlds. He exhorted the inmates to adopt self-help, and Shantiniketan became a busy hive. But on February 19th, it was immersed in grief at the news of Gokhale's sudden death. Gandhi bemoaned, "I set out to find a true hero and found only one in India." The Kumbh fair at Hardwar attracted many pilgrims. Gandhi too attended the fair, not with the sentiments of a pilgrim, but as a volunteer to do sanitation work. As an act of self-denial, here he pledged himself to limit his diet to 5 items and not to eat after sunset. Seeking his own hermitage in an atmosphere of renunciation and service, Gandhi founded the Satyagraha Ashram at Kochrab near Ahmedabad on May 25th. With 25 inmates bound by vows of truth and celibacy, non-violence and non-possession, Swadeshi, Khadi, and the removal of untouchability. Soon, difficulty arose over the use of the well on the admission of an untouchable family as inmates of the ashram. Gandhi was put to the test, but gradually the storm passed away. Untouchability was shaken to its foundation. In 1917, Gandhi found a congenial task in the service of the oppressed peasants on the indigo plantation of Champaran in North Bihar. His arrival for investigation into their grievances roused new hopes in the peasants, and they thronged to him to tell their woes. On being served with a quit order, Gandhi refused to comply with it out of a sense of public responsibility and expressed his determination to proceed with the inquiry. At his trial for disobedience, Gandhi said, "I have entered the country for rendering humanitarian and national service in obedience to the higher law of conscience," and pleaded guilty. The compulsory growing of indigo was abolished on the recommendation of the inquiry committee. The century-old stain of indigo was washed away, and the country had its first object lesson in individual civil disobedience. In the middle of 1917, on the outbreak of the plague in Kochrab village, Gandhi shifted his ashram to the bank of the river Sabarmati. Amidst the neem and tamarind trees was situated Gandhi's bare hut, Hriday Kunj, along with the simple dwellings of the inmates. Life at the ashram gave full play to the emotion and intellect of the residents. There were gardens to till and cows to tend. Throbbing with an active spirit of sacrifice, everyone performed his obligatory task of weaving. As evening fell, the inmates congregated to pay their respect to the different faiths of the world at the sanctuary. The four directions were its walls, and the canopy of the sky its dome. The sermons of Gandhi and the hymns of the Gita created a spirit of peace and love. In this community, where work was prayer and prayer love, Gandhi's personality was fully reflected. In 1918, unrest prevailed among the textile workers of Ahmedabad, who were underpaid and overworked. Gandhi espoused their cause, conducted a peaceful strike, and exhorted the workers to abide by their pledge never to resort to violence. The strike situation began to grow critical. 20 days passed by. Hunger had its effect on the strikers, and they began flagging. Gandhi spontaneously announced, "I will not touch any food." 3 days after the fast commenced, the mill owners accepted arbitration, and without any ill will, the righteous struggle achieved its end. Gandhi expressed his views with fervor, advocating Swadeshi in language, dress, and thinking. The inhuman destruction of the ancient art of hand spinning was corroding his heart. The discovery of the spinning wheel, consigned to the lofts as useless lumber in a remote village, gave him new hope, for as the loss of the spinning wheel had brought about India's slavery, its revival meant India's freedom. Gandhi arrived in Bombay for medical treatment, as hard work coupled with uncooked food had ruined his health. His refusal to take medicine and the vow not to take milk came in the way of his recovery. He yielded to Kasturbai's suggestion that he should take goat's milk. During the convalescent period at Mani Bhavan, he learnt and practiced spinning, and the wheel hummed merrily in his room, spinning peace, goodwill, and love in every revolution. On his sick bed, Gandhi was roused by the publication of the notorious Rowlatt Bills in February 1919, which sought to crush the civic rights of Indians and to gag the voice of revolt. A wave of anger greeted the bills all over India. Describing them as aggravated symptoms of a deep-seated disease in the ruling class, Gandhi informed the Viceroy about his desire to offer civil disobedience in protest. In spite of the united opposition of all elected Indian members, on March 18, the Black Bills were pushed through and became law. At Gandhi's call, the country observed April 6th as a day of humiliation and prayer. Vast multitudes united into common action solemnly affirmed their resolve to disobey the bills and refrain from violence to life, person, or property. True to the pledge, prohibited literature consistent with Satyagraha was selected. Gandhi went round the city to sell the prohibited literature, and the movement was inaugurated. At a Satyagraha demonstration, Gandhi emphasized the importance of sacrifice for the eternal ideals of justice and liberty. For no nation had ever risen without being purified through the fire of suffering. To defy the Indian Press Act, Gandhi published the weekly Satyagrahi, in which he expressed his opinions unhampered by any other consideration than that of his own conscience. The country was astir. There was an orgy of arrests and convictions. On Sunday, April 13th, Brigadier General Dyer marched with his armed force through the tortuous, torrid streets and mazy lanes of Amritsar. He entered Jallianwala Bagh in the heart of the city by the narrow entrance with a firm determination to do all men to death. Debouching from the passage, he ordered the troops to fire upon the seething mass of humanity gathered for a peaceful meeting. The Bagh suddenly resounded with bullet fire, carrying death and destruction among the unarmed, unwarned people. The firing continued till the ammunition was exhausted, killing 375 and injuring over 1,000 helpless men and women. And when all was over, heaps of wounded lay near this wall. The massacre and the terrible indignity of the martial law, inflicting the humiliating punishment of making people crawl on their bellies, and the public flogging of innocent victims shocked Gandhi. When the terror-stricken people indulged in violence, it suddenly dawned on him that it was a Himalayan miscalculation on his part to have called upon his countrymen to launch the civil disobedience movement prematurely, and he suspended the Satyagraha on April 18. The weeklies, Navjivan and Young India, were launched by Gandhi to expound the meaning of Satyagraha and Swadeshi. They soon reached the farthest corners of India and put heart into the people. The Amritsar Congress, held in December 1919, under the presidency of Motilal Nehru, adopted Gandhi's gospel of Swaraj through Swadeshi and his plea for the revival of the age-old cottage industries as India's prosperity was founded on the plough and the spinning wheel. The slogan, Mahatma Gandhi ki Jai, began to dominate the Indian political horizon, and the national movement took a new shape and developed a new orientation. The spinning wheel, Gandhi said, is a national necessity. Not on the clatter of arms, but on the reintroduction of the spinning wheel depends the economic and moral regeneration of India. Slowly, the music of one of the most ancient of India's machines once more permeated society. In April 1920, when poet Tagore visited Ahmedabad to attend the Gujarati Literary Conference, Gandhi greeted him with deference and affection and appealed to the people to donate generously for the poet's Vishwa Bharti. Gandhi identified himself with the Muslims when they launched the Khilafat agitation against the unjust peace terms imposed on Turkey by Britain. The Khilafat movement adopted Gandhi's doctrine of non-violent non-cooperation as an infallible remedy. In pursuance of the resolve, Gandhi reiterated that non-cooperation would be inaugurated on the 1st of August. At 12:40 in the night that very day, Lokmanya Bal Gangadhar Tilak, Gandhi's strongest bulwark, passed away. Lamenting his death, Gandhi observed, a giant among men has fallen. He will go down to the generations yet unborn as the maker of modern India. No man had preached the gospel of Swaraj with the consistency and insistence of the Lokmanya. On the appointed day, Gandhi gave the signal for the non-cooperation campaign by returning the Kesari Hind gold medal and the decorations received in South Africa to the Viceroy, for he could retain neither respect nor affection for the government which was moving from wrong to defend its immorality. India responded to Gandhi's call. People straightened their backs and raised their heads. Schools and colleges were emptied and the courts abandoned. With a view to lay the groundwork of truly Indian education, Gandhi founded the Gujarat Vidyapith at Ahmedabad. Its object was to preserve the languages of India and to use them as sources of national regeneration. Manual work, which formed a part of the curriculum, fostered a spirit of self-help and independence among the students. Gandhi looked upon the institution as a place where the sacred fire of India was to be consecrated in order afterwards to radiate throughout the world. Persuading the people to adopt India's real weapon of love and truth to fight the government, Gandhi condemned the doctrine of the sword. I want India to practice non-violence of the strong, her title of nobility. If she takes up the doctrine of the sword, she may gain momentary victory, but she will cease to be the pride of my heart. Swaraj was very much in the air and in people's thought when, in December 1920, the Nagpur session of the Congress unanimously approved Gandhi's resolution on the attainment of Swaraj by legitimate and peaceful means within 1 year, and the Constitution, as revised by him, turning the Congress into a mass organization. Thus began the Gandhi era in Congress politics. While touring the country incessantly and tirelessly, Gandhi did not lose sight of India's gravest problem, poverty. India as a nation, he observed, can live and die only for the spinning wheel. The womanhood and the masses of India have been awakened as never before at the call of the wheel. Its restoration alone will feed the millions of hungry mouths. The wasted hours of the nation should be utilized in converting cotton into cloth in our cottages. And at Gandhi's suggestion, the spinning wheel found a place in the Swaraj flag, with a white, green and red background symbolizing peace, purity and the unity of all faiths in India. Thus was born a flag for the non-violent revolt in 1921, representing an ideal to live for and die for.